Hi, welcome everyone. Today I'm super excited to be joined by someone whose life's work lives at the crossroads of science, spirit, and plants, Jean-François Sobieki. He's an ethnobotanist, herbalist, nutritionist from South Africa. He's the author of African Psychoactive Plants, Journey into Phytoalchemy, and has spent years learning directly from traditional healers, including a powerful apprenticeship with Northern Sotho healer Leti Muponya. He teaches online courses, runs plant medicine tours, and mentors people in connecting with these ancient medicines in grounding and respectful ways. He's presented globally, widely, written widely, and continues to bridge traditional knowledge with modern wellness in a powerful way. Jean-François, welcome. I'm so excited to dive into your journey and into the wisdom you carry. What makes your work really interesting to me, Jean-François, and why I've been so looking forward to this conversation is the way you kind of walk between worlds. So not only are you trained academically, but you've also spent years apprenticing with traditional healers, learning through experience, and especially learning from the plants themselves. And I think this kind of learning is so valuable because it goes beyond just theory, and it's embodied, it's relational, and it carries the type of wisdom that you can only really get by living it, and not just by studying it. And as a fellow anthropologist as well, I've studied and written about these plants, especially ayahuasca, and I feel a deep resonance with your path. And I was really excited to find your work and super curious to know more.
Thank you.
Like you, I believe that the power of these plants, they have a real power to heal, to teach, and to connect us to something ancient, intelligent, and also alive. This wisdom that they carry.
Great. Yeah, looking forward. Thank you, Isadora. Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. 20 years ago, or perhaps even before that, what first sparked your interest in plants and healing?
Well, Isadora, my path started when I was born, because it's this calling to work with plants was a gift from my grandmothers and grandfathers on my mother's side of the family, and where there are healers on my mother's side of the family, and my father's side has teachers. So from a very early age, I was drawn to nature, drawn to the elements. Just found myself more at home in the garden than inside the house, so to speak. But after school, I wanted to become a herbalist. That was my calling, to be a herbalist. But at the time, there wasn't any training institution to offer herbal medicine courses in South Africa. So I opted to do a BSc in botany and zoology. But while I was studying that, I was more drawn to plants. I picked up a book in the local library on Amanita muscaria mushroom, and I was amazed how this mushroom could transport you to other realms and really transform your consciousness so radically. So I researched everything I could about the amanitas, and then moved on towards other plants like ayahuasca and San Pedro, and experimented with them. And I had some very interesting experiences with the ayahuasca, very transpersonal. And so I got a taste of what the medicine is about. But then at a point, I was asking myself the question, well, and in the literature at the time, like Plants of the Gods, the literature was saying that Africa was poor in visionary plants. But that didn't make sense to me, because we have sangomas, which are called sangomas, the spiritual traditional healers, if you want to call it that, who spiritually diagnose. And we've got inyangas, or the herbalists. And we have a very rich tradition of traditional healing in Southern Africa and in South Africa. So I was curious whether the Sangomas were using plants for visionary purposes. So this curiosity grabbed me so deeply that I felt propelled to go and answer this question for myself. So without approaching an institution, an academia, or anything like that, I just went on my own curiosity and drove my VW Beetle into the local neighborhoods and started asking people the basic questions. You know, where are traditional healers? And when I found them, I asked them, I told them what I was doing, and I told them about my calling and my passion. And some traditions were open to me, others were not, and that was just how the nature of of it. Um, but those that were open and even public members of the public, they immediately told me of a plant called Buffon disticha, or the African sand poison bulb, which is used for divination in Southern Africa. And this very powerful visionary plant is very toxic. It can actually cause fatalities and has caused a number of fatalities. Um, this plant is boiled. The bulb of the plant is boiled, and the decoction is taken, a small amount of it, to see what is called the ispili, or the mirror, or the bioscope, or the television. And people use it for divination. They use it to find lost objects and stolen property, etc. But it's administered only by traditional healers who know how to use the plant, because it was used as a arrow poison by the sand bushman. So when it gets in your blood, it kills the animal. But if you drink too much of it, it will also kill you. So it's not one plant that I would say just for any psychonaut to go and find and experiment with, because you can cause toxicity to the liver, and you can. But if used correctly, it is a very, very powerful visionary plant. So I started to get more and more anecdotes about plants used for imibono visions in Zulu. So it was fascinating. I started to gather a lot of fieldwork reports.
Amazing. And
So,
it's like there's a poison and medicine in everything. It's just the dosage, right? That
yes, yeah. I mean that's a classical saying, but this plant is very, very poisonous. So
and so
one
is
has to
Amanita
be super
muscaria.
careful. Yeah. Well, yeah, Amanita. Um, it is, well, from what I remember, there's different ecotypes of Amanita muscaria. Some are more toxic than others. Um, but the toxicity that you normally see in the books with the skulls and the crosses and skulls is not actually indicative of its true use. It's not as, put it this way, in my opinion, it's not as fatal or poisonous as the books prescribe it to be. But I can understand why that is, because the educational material doesn't want people to go and eat this fungus in case there is a poisoning. But usually the poisoning is more of an intoxication. Um, but yeah, Amanita is fascinating.
And would the Sangoma self-administer the bowl to themselves or to the person interested? To
That's, yeah, usually they administer to the person that's interested, but they also do use it for for connecting with their ancestors. But we don't know much about its ethnographic use. So we are starting to research that in South Africa now through a center at one of the universities, um, where we are going to be looking at more of finding the ethnography around this plant, because the ethnography is very limited on Buffon.
Mm.
Um, and this is what I found in my own research, is that I understood eventually that the gap in the research, why Africa was overlooked for about the entheogens, is because the apartheid regime researchers, the white researchers, were more interested in food plants than magic and ritually used plants. And all the psychoactives are sitting in that category. So there was a very prejudiced and biased slant towards the research, which favored what the white apartheid regime researchers wanted to study. And unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, because now there's a renaissance in the study of the African plants beginning to happen. But it's only been 20 years since this revitalization happened, and I started doing my research. So myself and a number of other researchers, a few researchers, have revitalized it. Um, and now it's going into full swing. We have the center that's going into full swing into researching these plants,
That's
of
amazing.
which there's 306 plant species that I've documented in my book, which requires study.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I can't wait to dive deeper into your book. Did you get a lot of this wisdom from your apprenticeship with Letty Meponia? I
Absolutely, absolutely. That's,
She's done a lot
talking
of-
about Letty always made me smile because it was such a fruitful and rewarding time of my life. It's like Letty, from the beginning I met her, I knew there was something different about her. She was a very astute woman, a very wise and astute lady, a very like similar to a bodhisattva, not a a teacher. She was very mindful of what she said. Uh, she never spoke things just without meditating on what she was going to say, etc. So yes, I learned a lot about African traditional medicine because I spent so much time with her. Initially, she was an informant, but then with time, and my book goes into what she teaches me. Um, with time, she became like a second mother to me. She became like a very close companion, in fact. And I spent maybe once a week or twice a week over years visiting her and helping her to prepare medicines in the shop, learning from her, sitting with her, talking about healing, about life. She was an incredible person. So I've got much to be grateful for.
Can you share with us some of these insights about healing or life or even yourself that she helped you understand or learn about?
Yeah, I mean, I can write a whole book about her. I've actually got a lot of field notes that are, if I ever write a second book, it would be about her. Um, I mean, on the psychoactive plant side of things, Letty taught me that there's two major categories of psychoactive plants, according to her, and in African traditional medicine. The strong-acting plants, like the buffon or norto, which cause visions and if you want, I hate the word hallucinations, but visions. And then you have the subtle acting psychoactive plants called the ubulao. And now ubulao is very interesting because ubulao refers to a category of medicines that are made from the roots of particular plants. And these roots are pounded and put into a 5 liter container of water, which is then whisked with a forked stick and produces foam. So often these plants produce foam, which is not a coincidence, I think, because these foam containing plants are psychoactive in themselves. So what happens is, Isadora, is when you prepare this medicine, you drink the medicine in the morning, and then you vomit. You manually induce vomiting, and this manual induction of vomiting, it cleanses the body of mucus, and the mucus seems to block the senses. And how I found this out is when I went to India in 2011, I did a process called Vamana therapy, where you also use vomiting medicines. And what Dr. Frawley says in one of his books, this researcher on Ayurvedic medicines, is that Vamana therapy unclouds the vision. And when I read that, that's exactly the words that my teacher used with me one day when she said, Jean, if I don't palazza or vomit, my vision becomes clouded. So I saw complete, exact descriptions across two different cultures of how this vomiting therapy seems to have an effect on the senses. And how it does that, I'm still not sure. I was saying to a research team the other day, we would like to research what that mechanism is. Some people say, a pharmacist friend of mine said that the vomiting might get rid of and unblock the phlegm take the phlegm out of the body, which will increase circulation to the brain. It might be that. or it might be diaphragmatic breathing that causes more oxygenation. But whatever the mechanism is, it's very powerful because it opens up your senses. After, when I did my medicine initiation, a couple of, well, yeah, what about a year later after that, after taking this plant medicine, after 6, 7 days, I started to feel more stimuli around me. The stimuli around me became more intense. So, in a nutshell, vomiting with this medicine and also taking the foam at nighttime and eating the foam Ubulao is a plant teacher medicine. It's what you could consider African plant teacher medicine. So we have our own plant teacher medicines here, which are not overtly or psychedelic, but they nevertheless open up your senses so that you know more about yourself. So they are tools of self-knowledge. So yeah, Ubulao is fascinating.
It actually reminds me of oje. It's a South American plant that is used as a purgative to clean your system before ingesting ayahuasca.
Yes.
So they prepare it in a liquid that you drink, and it's used to cleanse the body before receiving the medicine. I just thought it would be just to have a clear vehicle to receive the medicine, but maybe it causes something in you as well that allows for you to be clearer in
Yes,
reading.
I definitely think so, Isadora. I think there's multiple mechanisms happening. One is the cleansing, and then the other is those saponins seem to have also an effect on dreaming and sensitivity. So I think altogether, it's a technology that's working with your system to open up sensitivity and intuition. And quite rightly so. In the Amazon, after I did my initiation, and I go into this in my book, the sequence of medicines used in the Amazon in the initiation is nearly identical to what I went through in my initiation. And when I spoke to other traditional healers about this, they verified that yes, you use the 4 categories of initiation medicine, which are cleansing. So you first cleanse yourself to let go, mostly even psychologically in my experience, it was to let go of the past self, if you want to call it that, to let go of all the cords of the cell of the past, anything of the past, the baggage of the past, to let go of that. And I used various medicines, which I go into in my book, of how to do that. But then after you cleanse, you open up with new information with Ubulao, and sometimes psychedelic plants will feature there too, just to disrupt the system and cause perturbation, which also is part of the learning process. But then after that, there are 2 other categories, main categories that are used. One is to ground yourself. So a very important thing I learned from my training and with Letty is that you can't only open with plants. You also need to ground. And this seems to be across neuroscience, other systems of learning, that perturbation is necessary for systems to learn. You can't just have perturbation all the time and expect to learn. You have to have perturbation and then times of balance and calm to ground and integrate. And it makes perfect logical sense. And I think this is one of the things that is a takeaway message from my work, is that when in therapy, plant-assisted therapy, or in traditional plant-assisted therapy, there's a place for both. There's a place for perturbation and change facilitated by the plants, and then there's a place for balancing plant medicines. And a lot of psychonauts might not know that. They might just take ayahuasca, go back home, and then carry on with their life. But from my experience, what I did was I did 2 weeks of grounding medicines, red tree bark medicines, which I go into also into my book, which helped me to ground and center myself, because the Ubulao was so intense around day 12 that the deepest questions of my life were right in my field of perception, and I couldn't get away from them. It felt like there was a mirror. I called it the mirror Ubulao. And this plant, I took a single plant. This plant amped my sensitivity and intuition to such an extent that I felt this question about my life was on me that I couldn't get away from. And once I faced that question, my teacher said, "Okay, we need to ground now and relax." So, because I was ready to run away from her, from my home, from my house that I was renting close to her, it got so intense. So, so there's a technology of using the plants, not just visionary plants, but cleansing, visionary, relaxing, and then also strengthening and fortifying plants that are all used in a sequence as a technology. So it's really, really fascinating that both cultures have discovered this pragmatic use of plants to learn. And my hypothesis is that this way of using plants is the way that these two diverse cultures have both found independently. I'm assuming that there wasn't contact, but between Africa and South America or on the medicine level, but I might be incorrect about that. I would love anthropologists to correct me if I'm wrong. But regardless, these two cultures, different cultures, use the plants as a technology to learn and develop, self-develop, have self-develop. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
fascinating. I love
incredible.
how you refer to them as technology. For me, they are the original technology, and there's so much more to learn from them. Uh,
Yes.
it's fascinating.
Organic technology interfacing, I call it. Yeah.
I love that. Organic technology interfacing. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just the way in which they know how to use different plants in conjunction with each other and how they can be so complementary towards each other.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
it's fascinating, and this deep wisdom, right, that comes from so far down ancestral lineages that it's so important nowadays to reconnect to that, to maintain that wisdom, and to share it and not have it forgotten because it can be so
Yes.
visceral to us today.
Absolutely, absolutely, Isadora. And I think now with the there's some authors writing about, or scholars rather, writing about the medicalisation of psilocybin, and how it's going to are saying that it's going to follow that that model, of just take the pill, you'll be better, and it just strips away the whole collective aspect of taking plants or taking plants under a teacher and learning through a culture, all of those things that we need to remember in this field. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think the problem would be, right? Is about having that reverence towards the plant, towards the essence of the plant. It's the energy it encompasses, the relationship that you can have by dieting that plant.
Yes,
And in South America, I remember dieting bobinsana and spending weeks just being in relationship with that plant and harnessing
yes,
that. It's a symbiotic relationship in the end, and you get back as much as you give, and it's honoring the
right,
plant and its sacred wisdom it holds. And different
right.
plants carry different knowledge, different wisdom that you can kind of download through being in this type of relationship with it, through taking tiny amounts for long periods of time. And yeah, perhaps if we strip away all of that relationship, what comes would be less valuable in a way.
Yes,
Yeah. So African plants, medicine are super rich, complex, and so deeply rooted in healing. But for some reason, they're not getting as much attention in the popular media. We talk a lot about South American plants, about ayahuasca, San Pedro. But what about, and actually, Kana is getting a lot of traction at the moment.
yes, yeah. Canna is it. But Canna is more of a just a relaxer. Um, I don't think it featured that much in it, like trance dancing, as far as I know. I
Yeah,
think it was more Buffon. Buffon was supposedly featured in trance dancing, but there are a number of plants that were used to build up the kia, the energy. But yeah, Scaletium is gaining traction because it's such a good relaxer. But there are multitudes of plants here that haven't been even researched yet, which is I'm hoping to I'm hoping to present at possibly at psychedelic science conference this year on my work, um, and bringing this more to light about the use of ubulao, for example. I mean, ubulao, most people have no idea what it is, but it's profound plant teacher medicine. It works profoundly, and the like you're saying that the ritual component of it is so important because when you work every day with your guts and your phlegm and you vomiting, you working deeply with yourself. It's not like just taking a pill and running off to work and then, expecting results. You actually have to put in the work.
yeah,
And this is why I respect it so much, is because you have to work with the medicine on a deep level to get results. It's not a quick fix.
yeah.
Um,
That's a huge
yeah,
misconception now in today's society where we think psychedelics are magic medicine and a magic pill you can just take, and we're so used to instant gratification that we often neglect the dedication it takes to want to change, to want to heal, and the work
yeah,
actually involves. Uh,
exactly.
and this goes into, for me, the most important work happens in the preparation and integration, the time before you go into these experiences and what you do after to integrate this experience into your daily life,
Yeah,
to integrate
yes.
this wisdom and this knowledge and these newfound perspectives. So I'm curious as to how you see integration or preparation. Because even so today, as psychedelics and psychedelic uh, work is getting more traction, there's very specific protocols of how you should prepare, how you should integrate. But it also it creates a sort of rigid structure. Okay, this is what you need to do to go into this. And it kind of makes it a bit rigid for me. I think there needs to be space to be a bit more playful with it and see how you work well with it, how you work well with uh, going into the experience. How do you feel about these structures that are being implemented through this work? And yes, there's a lot of grounding. I think that's an essential part, is being grounded within yourself, because these experiences can often take you on such a
Yeah, yes.
that
Yes.
sometimes it's hard to come back into.
Yes, they're change catalysts, from my own experience and giving mushrooms to my friends. It completely disrupted their routines, and people were questioning their whole life and their partners and relationships, and so they're change catalysts and they can be disruptors. Absolutely, their nature is to disrupt the routine, conditioned beliefs. So absolutely, support is necessary. That's why I think the grounding period after taking psychedelics, and that there should be a whole process, in my opinion, and I'm not sure if that's being taught in the current psychedelic assisted therapy trainings, but there should be a kind of a process that emulates what traditional healers are doing with their patients to take them through a period of relaxation, grounding for weeks, not a day or two, but for a number of weeks at least. And that is something I learned from my traditional healing experience, that we can apply from their wisdom and there's particular ways to do that grounding, of course. Um,
Could you tell us a bit more about that? How would you define grounding, and what is the.
well, yeah, I mean, the grounding was primarily focused on the red medicines, the tree medicines. Um, but I was also advised, not to limit social interactions. So it was kind of like a prolonged dieta. Um, but all types of activities that can, I suppose, that can help to integrate and ground it. Meditation would obviously be essential, you know. But I would say also giving yourself time to be on your own and not jumping straight back into work routines. So if a person could take leave for a week, or, that's, I always recommend that for people taking Ubala, go straight back into work, but at least take 7 to 8 days off so that you can have time to re-enter the orbit,
Yeah. Um, yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important to bring mindfulness into what you've just experienced, to give your body and your mind and your soul time to catch up with this intense experience that just
Yes.
can be quite discombobulating,
Yes,
and quite frightening if you're not fully.
absolutely. That's why, like, I think a therapeutic process. Like, I had a teacher who guided me every day. When there was a disruption after my initiation, the one night I watched a video which on the Cove of all things. I picked the Cove to watch, and I had a nightmare where I woke up in the night and I screamed, and I phoned my teacher, and she just calmed me down. She knew exactly what was happening. It was the impressions that were going through my eyes, which went into my deep subconscious. But I see that we've got less than a minute, so perhaps um, we can
Yeah,
continue on the next episode.
yeah, absolutely. See you in a second.
Okay.
Um, where do we leave off? And I mean, for me, the most interesting thing is how to bring this ancestral wisdom about all of these plant technologies into modern society. There's this huge curiosity, interest, and use of these medicinal and psychoactive plants at the moment. And how do we get it right this time around? I think there was this mass voyage into this world in the 60s, and it kind of failed, right? People weren't guided. They didn't have these elders to show them the way, to guide them,
Mm.
to support them through this journey.
Right.
So a lot of people
Right.
lost, a lot of damage was done. And
Yes.
here we are, the third wave of psychedelic renaissance. And what do you think is essential to get this right this time around? How can we bring ancestral wisdom and the science together to create a more beneficial model for us today?
Yeah. On that level, I think one needs to embrace still the tradition. I mean, we can learn from the traditional healers and the plants to get new psychedelic compounds, discovery, lead compound discovery, etc., to develop new drugs that or a new drugs to basically new psychedelic mechanisms of action. But I think for the learning process, it's exactly that. We need a process. Um, and the vision that well, yeah, the idea that I have is to create like healing gardens where people can actually take, for example, Ubulao in the traditional context and do retreats African style here and open themselves up very gradually over 1 or 2 weeks, and then face, like I did, like face questions about themselves, etc. So it's I mean, whether we like it or not, within a few years there will be psilocybin prescribed by doctors just for you to take for depression, etc. But it's very hard to get a holistic healing effect from without the whole ritual of being in a new surrounding, the dieta concept, of isolating yourself, mentally preparing yourself for new knowledge, using different categories of medicines. I think all of that is a technology that shouldn't be taken apart, but should be actually gone back to and or preserved, but in a way that is accessible to Western consumers. So my thinking is to create African retreats, Ubulao retreats, for example, where people come to take African psychoactive plants in a way that is non-harmful, in a way that is responsible. And Ubulao is super responsible in that way because it doesn't give you blast your head off into infinity, which is can be great at times, but at other times it can be fragmentary and it can lead to trauma. We know this. There isn't just the roses and sunshine part of psychedelics. There is, a very potentially dangerous aspect to psychedelics when used contraindicated, or if somebody's got schizotypal personalities, etc. So Ubulao presents a way for us to use psychoactive plants, but the subtle acting psychoactive plants in a way that would be sustainable, responsible, and you also take charge and responsibility of your process by working every day through the medicines. So um, that model of creating gardens, healing gardens, would be in a fantastic way for people to embrace that technology. I think that's my opinion. Obviously, having what's happening now with plant-assisted therapy, psychedelic-assisted therapists being trained, especially to deal with trauma, is indispensable. I think that people who are self-taught but don't know how to deal with psychiatric emergencies is fraught with danger and problems. And a lot of people who have bad experiences are not going to put it on Facebook and make it public. But I think there can be a lot of damage being done by 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 would-be healers or healers who think that they have a lot of experience with psychedelics, but then one day, they're going to invite trouble onto themselves when they deal with someone with severe PTSD and that PTSD explodes in a ceremony. It's very irresponsible, I think, to not have a psychological background or training in dealing with psychiatric emergencies. I think that should be core to the training of these therapists.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just about creating a safe container in which people are guided, supported, and held through these experiences. And this is why having a shaman, having an indigenous healer who have these years of experience with the medicine, who have this really profound connection and understanding of it, is so useful when having people do these types of experiences. And yeah,
Yes.
today there are a lot of charlatans saying that they are shamans, that they know, and that a lot of people are getting hurt in this space. So what can you say about harm reduction, about working with people who have these predispositions to schizophrenia? Should they be doing these in any case, or
Yeah.
what's the approach of indigenous healers when working with these plants and people who have really deep-seated?
Yes. Well, that's a great question, Stora. We are busy. That's one of the projects we've highlighted and earmarked is because I just touched the surface of the whole thing in my work. I showed that there is significant use and the initiation categories and yeah, other things too. But the deeper understandings of what the traditional healers here, how they manage psychosis, for example, has not been researched at all. I don't think I've come across one paper that addresses that. So that is a whole field that is opening up right now. So we need collaboration, and we need definitely international collaboration. This is why I'd like to attend more conferences, is to connect with fellow researchers who are doing the neuroscience, the psychiatric science behind all of this, and then learn from our traditional healers here in Africa exactly that. How do they manage psychiatric emergencies? And I think the use of the plant, the buffon, is used very much in that way. It's a profound sedative. I didn't mention, but it's also a profound sedative. So they calm patients down, but we need to do the ethnography around that.
Uh, I heard that something about when a young person shows signs of psychosis or schizophrenia in these types of societies, they're actually taken in by the shaman or the
Yeah.
healer because they're showing some sort of openness, some sort of sensitivity towards the spiritual realm, and they're actually
Yeah.
have a gift that they're taken in, taught how to deal with it, how to work with the
Yeah.
space. However, in our Western society, we put these people into insane asylums, into these
Mm.
institutions that make them think
Mm.
that they are different, there's something wrong with them, which kind of
Yes.
forces that feeling, right?
Yes. I think that the difference needs to be made that absolutely, like even Stanislav Grof goes into that, into the spiritual emergency. A lot of people absolutely in institutions in the West are very gifted. Not might not necessarily be healers, but healers often can land up in clinics too because of neurodivergence and being neurodivergent. So the percentage of people with healing gifts in institutions should, I'm curious whether that someone has actually done a quantitative and qualitative research on showing what kind of percentage of people at a particular time would show those attributes, which I would imagine are a lot. But that said, African healers, from what I understood and learned from, there is definitely a classification of, I think they call it waklanye, which means mad. So the healer will recognize if someone is on a spiritual journey or whether they're just mad. And so then their prescription of what medicines they use will differ depending on whether they diagnose the person as being having a spiritual emergency or having a plain psychosis or a psychotic breakdown. And they will apply different techniques, different methods, and different medicines in that regard.
Yeah, it's fascinating. um
Yeah.
so you've spoken a lot about the healing properties of these medicinal plants and these psychedelic plants. How do you see their role evolving in modern society?
Um,
Do you think there's an openness to it? Are these illegal in South Africa? Is their usage accepted? Is it widely known about, practiced?
are you referring to the psychoactive or psychedelic African plants
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in African culture, for example, ubulao is used by laymen and healers alike.
Okay.
So multitudes of people use ubulao every day just to cleanse themselves. And what is very interesting, Isadora, is I found over many years, I understood that these medicines are called lucky medicines. And when I heard that initially, I immediately thought, well, it's a magical term or a superstitious term. It's not taking it seriously. But when I dove deeper into it after years of studying this, what I realized is that lucky medicines are actually metaphorical indicators of physiological action. So having clearer dreams, having more energy, having clearer perception, having more intuition is all very lucky to experience by virtue of taking the medicine. So here, the lucky medicines are actually used as an opener, as a tonic by multitudes of people. But the difference is that I was taught that, and what I learned is that the Ubulawa gives you who you are. So if you're a healer, it will amplify your healing abilities. But if you're not a healer, it will maybe give you some dreams or make you feel lighter or maybe enhance your intuition also. But the medicine is very specific. It's as if it's like a plant teacher that gives you what you need. And this is what I experienced also with ayahuasca. I feel that these psychedelic plants and psychoactive plants, they kind of open you to who you are anyway.
Yeah.
So whatever you need to experience or whatever's going on for you, it will show you like a mirror And so no one's experience is identical. This whole thing of, seeing uh, iconographic, I don't know what the word is, um, archetypal kind of like animal, like such a mama and this and that. I don't know about that. I think people's experiences can be very individualistic. Um, and yes, if people have researched a lot about shamanism, then it's likely they will see symbols that they already are familiar with. But I think the plant teachers give you who you are in a nutshell.
Is there a main teaching that people get from taking these umbulao, or is it just a personal message? Can you compare it to others like mushrooms or ayahuasca, where you kind of get this sense of awe and clarity and perspective about what this
Yeah, that's a great question. They do work differently in that regard. The DMT experiences I've had, the ayahuasca experiences, they can give you a real taste of samadhi, satori experiences, self-actualized states. Like I had incredible experiences with DMT, um, uh, which were kind of like satori experiences, self-actualized states. But the Ubuntu works a bit differently. It doesn't give you that awe. It kind of turns up the heat of self-knowledge. It's like a mirror. You could call it mirror medicine and that's for the brave, because a lot of people want, let's face it, they want to have experiences which are very transcendental, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing, but we also know from books like Zigzag Zen, the discourse between Buddhism and psychedelia, that the psychedelics opened the way for people towards the Eastern traditions. They give you a taste of what's possible, but then you have to work on it through meditation to achieve those states sustainably. You can't rely on the plants or the psychedelics um, to do that all the time for you. But Ubulao, it it gives you personal messages through dreams. Um, there was once a professor who was researching Ubulao in South Africa, and he brought it to the fore, Professor Manton Hurst. In his thesis, he documented how taking Ubulao gave him a dream of killing a serpent at university, and it was very symbolic of his route in life to take, whether it was going to be psychiatry or anthropology. And so, it gives you these big dreams or big realizations or big questions that you need to face and to deal with. So it's very, very, but it gives you very particular guidance, the Ubulao. Yeah.
and you diet it over a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. Over 1 to 2 weeks. I took it for about 12 days.
yeah.
The first couple of days, nothing happened, but around day 7, 8, things started to heat up on the feeling things more. I couldn't go into shops. It was just too overwhelming. And then the mirror started happening. This deepest question of my life was in my periphery and I couldn't escape it. It was like on me.
Wow.
And that freaked me out. It freaked the hell out of me. So, but that's where you need a teacher, a healer who knows the territory, and you can say, "Don't worry, this is expected. Let's uh, let's let's take the red medicines now and ground you, relax you, And she explained as she went along. But when people, my concern is when people are taking these plants on their own, they don't have the guidance of someone who knows that territory, that the spirit of these plants, and so you kind of have to work it out for yourself, which is not, there's no wrong or right, but it helped me a lot. Put it this way, it helped me a lot to have a teacher to guide me through that process. Like that one night when I screamed in the middle of the night, broke my medicine cabinet where my medicine was, and my teacher knew exactly what happened. I thought it was a spirit or a ghost, but it was basically those impressions from that watching that movie after having not watched any visual things for 3 to 4 weeks. Eventually, the subconscious was open
Mm.
and ripe for new information. So I let these impressions of dolphins being massacred into my subconscious. And that night it came out. It came out in an explosion. I've never had anything like that happen to me before. So, if I had to experience that on my own, I could have easily thought I was being possessed, gone mad, landed up in an institution. But because I had a teacher explain to me the next day, she said, don't worry, Jean, it's because of what you watched. It went into your mind, and your mind then produced this this phantom, this
Reflection of it.
So
What was the most important tool you used to ground after this experience, and what tool could you recommend other people use for integration?
for integration, I mean the red medicine, tree bark medicines that I used were very important. One of them is called Dabula Valo or Maitinis undata. It's actually used for shock. So the Dabula Valo actually connotes shock. So it's actually the particular relaxing medicines that people can use in the initiation process or in this yeah, it's an initiation process to ground yourself. That night in particular, I burnt a lot of impepo, which is incense from the everlasting flower family. And she told me to burn a lot. And what it does, it tranquilizes you. So you feel very tranquil, and you can use that as a medicine. But there's a whole number of medicines. Some of them I go into in my book, which you can use to ground and settle. But the the bottom line is that whatever helps you to relax. So if it's qigong, if it's mindfulness, if it's positive impressions through watching videos on gurus, for example, or um, teachings of Ramana Maharshi, or anything that's spiritual is also good. But generally it's preferred not to watch visual things when you're doing initiation. Maybe afterwards you can. But the medicine grounded me incredibly. I was even quite puffy in the face because the one medicine is antihypertensive, so it slowed down the heart rate. And so I actually put on like fluid on, like put on puffiness in my body. And but I was very grounded after 2 weeks of that, 1.5 weeks of that medicine. I was super chilled and super relaxed. But see, that all is part of a process. It's not a go there and come home and then go back to work. It's like you have to, if you have a teacher that can supervise and just monitor you daily, even if you do have to go to work, but you take the medicines every day, um, and have certain restrictions, that all helps. I mean, I know of a person who still managed to go to work and do this process, but it's more recommended usually to have isolation and away from people because you're very, very open.
Yeah, and I think that's the main challenge today with people going on psychedelic retreats for 3 days, going on an intense journey of travel and through these ceremonies, and then coming back to their fast-paced life immediately after,
Yes, exactly.
back to work, back into a busy bustle of the city. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think practices like actual grounding, being in nature, meditating are incredibly powerful tools just to realign, recenter, and be present with yourself and what's going on in your body and in your mind, and taking that quiet time. Because we're constantly
Absolutely.
doing things from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, either conversation,
Yes.
people, food, TV, phone, it doesn't stop.
Yes. Yes. I
So
wrote Isadora, I wrote an article, like a future like vision article, where I said, I talked about a syndrome called lysis, loss of self-identity syndrome, where people got so overstimulated that they started to lose sense of what identity means, with their own identity. And we are experiencing that, as I think, as a species right now. There's just so much stimuli that we're constantly in adrenaline states, and that I hypothesize will lead to a major depressive syndrome in society generally, where the burnout levels will be enormous, where we're constantly bombarded. And I think we're in the early days of that. It's only been, what, 5 years since Instagram, or I don't know how many years, but five, with TikTok and all this. But, more is to come. And I'm just wondering, Isidore, like, at what at what capacity can we actually tolerate new information? Because if you get constantly bombarded, that's why I think meditation is indispensable, because it's breaking the pattern. We need pattern breakers. The psychedelics, as we know, as you know, are pattern interrupters. That's how they actually heal. It's not even so much the visions, but that they disrupt the conditioned beliefs and fears that we have in ourselves, that allows us to have an awakening or a new insight or a new revelation or new connection. And we need those interrupters. So anything that can interrupt the patterns is good medicine right now. And I mean, what's happening around the world right now, it's a shit show. It's like absolutely people, I mean, the depression levels must be skyrocketing and accelerating at a rapid pace right now. So yeah, anything to relax is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
Except benzodiazepines. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There are some more natural and more efficient ways to break that pattern and to course correct in a way. It's that fresh slate of
Yeah.
onto these already very deep pathways that we're used to thinking in. And it's so
Yeah.
interesting because this is exactly what I devoted my thesis to and my research on ayahuasca. The title of my thesis is In Search of the Self. I was fascinated in understanding why so many people were going to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, this explosion of ayahuasca tourism. I was curious as to what people were looking for. I mean, I was
Mhm.
certainly looking for something too, and I realized is ourselves, that connection to the divine within us, to this um soul connection. And it's because we've lost it with nature as well. We live in concrete jungles, we communicate
Mhm.
with each other through technology, and our friends are people we think we watch on our screens. So there is this
Mhm.
disconnection from our community to ourselves and to nature. And this, as you said,
Mhm.
has created this skyrocketing in mental illness. And
Yeah.
and these can be really powerful tools. So thank you so much for the work you do, for the education you do. And for me, that's an essential part of preparing to go on such a journey of finding the self, is actually having an understanding of what that means, of having an education, of having people who have contributed to the research, to this wisdom. And yeah, it's important, the work you're doing, Jean-Francois. So thank you so much. And I hope that we can dive deeper into more of your book and all the different plants you've learned about, that you've recorded, um, and try and create a bridge between these therapeutic models and these ancestral models, and try and
Yeah.
find a middle ground that has reverence towards this wisdom and towards the people who have held it for so long, without
Yeah.
and towards the plants as well, right? And not abuse them.
Yes.
It's so easy
Yes.
to abuse. It's like cannabis. Cannabis is a sacred plant, yet people use it so mindlessly and abuse it.
Yeah.
So it's reevaluating our relationship to nature, to plants, and to ourselves.
Yeah. And Isidora, absolutely. And on that level, just being a medicine man myself, I realize that there's medicines, there's a lot of medicines, elemental medicines that we can turn to know ourselves. Like just making a simple fire
Mm,
and sitting around a fire is so therapeutic, because there's just something. ancient and archetypal about it, you know? So working with water, working with the ocean, working with the river, working with the elements, with fire and dance and song, all of that reconnects us to ourselves. So the plants are another tool, but there are all these other tools that are so indispensable, like just connecting your hands to the earth,
Yeah.
you know, and letting energy pour into the earth. That, you know, is one simple way that people can ground themselves, is just by standing with bare feet on earth and doing things like qigong. And so there's a lot of that, you know. I think shamanic societies would, for them, it's second nature that, you know, they would do these things all the time. But we are getting divorced from that. There are people that probably don't even know how to make a fire. Like they would say, you know, I mean, I remember when I had an active practice, there were a lot of people that couldn't visualize something like an apple. They didn't understand what it is to visualize an apple. So even basic visualization can be taught. I learned it through a mentor because the school road learning system killed my imagination completely. I had to reawaken it through ayahuasca, through visualization, through speaking to mentors. So it's a process, it's a journey, it's an alchemical process. You know, these days, for anybody to know themselves is an alchemical process because we've been so flooded by rubbish. I mean, when I watch TV, 10 minutes into watching TV, and I've seen a gruesome murder, and my brain doesn't, I don't think my brain differentiates between what it sees on a television and what's experienced. It's the same thing, whether it's real or on a TV screen. So I think there's so much work for us to do, to sit in circles, medicine circles or men's support circles, make a fire, talk about your life, connect with the elements, all these things. Qigong is fantastic. I do Qigong every morning now just to get energy flowing. All of these things are readily accessible that we can turn to, you know?
It's almost that it's almost like we need to learn how to be human again.
Yeah, we have to
Yeah.
rehuman ourselves. I love that. I
Let's
love
learn
that.
how to breathe and how to
Yeah, how to breathe, how to eat, how to do all the basic things. We've lost touch with all of it. Eh?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. In the West, in the East, I think they still know the whole Tao, you know, Taoism, and the art of longevity, etc. But here in the West, we're in trouble. Eh? I think
Well, that's why we have people like you to teach us the basics again. And love your course on phytoalchemy. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what type of
oh,
people take them?
sure. So yeah, on my website, fightalchemy.co.za, I've got a course, a Fight Alchemy course. It basically covers, um, I take it from the building blocks of nutrition for a healthy mind, for a healthy brain. So how neurotransmitters are made from specific foods, so additive production. Um, then I, from the nutrition for a healthy brain, I go into an introduction to what are psychoactive plants and substances, how they affect the nervous system. Then I progress into the major visionary plants like ayahuasca, San Pedro, psilocybin mushrooms, ubulao, and then describe how to use them, how to prepare them, and their traditional uses. And then finally, I go on a virtual plant safari walk where I talk about African plants and how they're used and what they're for. So it's a lovely course. It's a lovely course that people can take, and it's for people, anyone who's interested in herbal medicine, self-medication with natural medicines, herbalists, ethnobotanists, homeopaths, natural medicine practitioners, psychedelic assisted therapists. It goes into ethnobotany, so it bridges things too. It bridges ethnobotany with herbalism and psychedelic studies. So it's a bit of all of three of those, I could say.
Thank you so much. Where can people find your work? So you've mentioned your websites, your course. They
Yes.
can connect with you on LinkedIn. And
Yes, on LinkedIn and the yeah. And the book is it can be found on Amazon. So if you type in African psychoactive plants, journeys in phytoalchemy, or even African psychoactive plants, you will see the book on Amazon. So it can be reached on bought by through Amazon.
Okay, amazing. Is there anything else you think our audience should know? Anything you would like to share? Something I forgot to ask?
I think we need to integrate the traditional with the modern. That's why I think like this project that I'm wanting to do, and I've wanted to do for a long time, but it seems like now there's an opportunity again to do it, can bridge like the modern, the like people who visit gardens, botanical gardens. A lot of people love it because it's natural to feel good in gardens, but to possibly integrate the therapies, the African therapies, like steaming and washing and bathing with medicines. I didn't talk about those, but I do mention those in the book. Um, can be incorporated into these healing gardens, and we need to have spaces, healing spaces in our society. This is something I realized when I traveled to the east, like where there's temples in Bangkok, for example. You're walking down a busy road with shops, and all of a sudden there's a temple, and you can happily just walk inside that temple and meditate. We don't have those those places, and even churches in for example, here where I stay, they're locked up during the week. To get into a place to just meditate is like a mission. So to create healing spaces, so like gardens with healing spaces in them, would be a fantastic thing for society to start connecting in nature in a new way, but in an old way, if that makes sense. Like, you know, so I think there's a place for psychoactive plants and traditional. We can learn a lot from traditional healers about integrating um, psychedelic experiences and psychoactive plant experiences and into therapy and what we can learn about them, what we talked about today. Um, but people shouldn't forget that ritual and context is as important as the plants and your intention. Just taking a psilocybin capsule in the morning and it will help in one level, neurogenesis and all of that, and but we shouldn't forget our roots. I think it reminds me of Joseph Campbell, all of his work, The Hero's Journey, and um, connecting with archetypes, and connecting with the collective too, like connecting with each other. Like we need to connect more with people. It sounds crazy, but we're living in a crazy society where people are very, very disconnected. Everything is brought to them from the shops now. You don't have to go to the shop. You can get your food delivered. So people are getting more and more isolated, and that is translating into more and more depression. We know that already.
Yeah.
So we need to have antidotes to that. And antidotes to that is to create healing spaces in our society, to get people to connect more through expressive dance or making fires or finding new ways for people to connect is very important. That's, I would say, is take my last message.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's so valuable. And I really hope to see more of these spaces. I can't wait to see what you do out in South Africa. And I hope to see this integrated in Europe as well, and having these spaces to
Yeah.
be in community.